Somewhere in Europe, under layers of earth that no one else dared to dig, a silent group was financing a secretive archaeological operation. No ads, no press, no explanations. The most curious thing? The money did not come from private companies or governments. It came from the church. But what were they looking for there? According to reports leaked by local officials, the excavations revealed something that seemed out of place, out of time, and out of the official narrative. An underground, pyramidal structure with perfect angles, hidden corridors, and inscriptions that did not belong to any known European language. The discovery was never officially released, but the silence spoke too loudly. Why would the church secretly finance the search for a hidden pyramid? And why, right after the find, the documents disappeared, the accesses were sealed, and did everyone involved sign eternal confidentiality agreements? We would be before a secret purposely buried for centuries? Or something deeper, a type of energetic, spiritual, symbolic portal that should never be reactivated? Today, we're going to unearth that story. And maybe in doing so, we'll unearth something inside us too. Sometimes what changes everything? It's not a big revelation, but one slip, a small error in the silence system. That's what happened in 1984 during a discreet reorganization of ancient archives at a monastery in southern Italy. Among prayer books and ecclesiastical documents with no apparent value, a researcher came across an old envelope sealed with an unidentified ecclesiastical symbol. Inside, there was a manuscript yellowed by age and an enigmatic map. It showed no rivers, no Roman roads. In the center, traced with perfection, there was a pyramid-shaped figure, geometric, symmetrical, submerged underground. No reference to the surface, no common captions. Just a handwritten Latin phrase, almost like a warning. He keeps the church in darkness. The church keeps in the shadows. The location indicated by the map was neither desert nor remote. It was a discrete point, close to a current city with modern architecture, where no one would imagine such an ancient secret. The manuscript was immediately withdrawn from circulation. But something had already escaped. Some images were recorded before the collection. And what started as an archival slip-up, it aroused the interest of the right people, and very powerful funds. Curiously, less than 2 years later, discrete movements began in that same region. There was no fanfare, no construction signs, but there was something that caught the attention of those who knew where to look. Excavations, benches in silence. Who financed the search for something that, officially, should not exist? And why? Did they keep everything away from the eyes of the world? The excavations began subtly. Equipment arrived without identification. Professionals were recruited under unusual confidentiality agreements. Apparently, it was just another underground project. But the few who managed to observe from afar report something out of the ordinary. The excavations followed a very specific geometric format. They weren't looking for something, seemed unearth something already very well defined. It was then that the hypothesis spread among independent researchers. Would it be possible for there to be a buried pyramid on European soil? The idea, at first glance, seems absurd. We were taught from an early age that the pyramids belonged to Egypt, to Mexico, to distant civilizations, but never to Europe. Why would it be? Don't exist? Or were they just not included in the official history? What if the old world kept its own pyramidal structures, not as tombs, but as centers of spiritual and symbolic energy, intentionally covered up over the centuries? Some sources suggest that there were at least 5 underground pyramid formations in Europe, hidden under hills or modern urban areas. But this one in particular, the plant found in the monastery, there seems to be something different, not just because of the shape, but for what would be at the top. A symbol removed shortly after the discovery, and which, according to confidential reports, it was taken directly to a vault in Rome. The symbol that the church made disappear on the same day of the excavation. What did it represent? And why couldn't it be seen? Documents rescued by independent historians reveal that, between the 1930s and 1970s, at least 3 archaeological expeditions were conducted in the same region indicated by the ancient map. None of them appear in public records. None were announced as academic research. All were discreetly financed by institutions linked to the Church. And although the Vatican has never declared direct involvement, names associated with the most reserved orders, such as the Jesuits and cloistered Benedictines, are listed as patrons in the preserved receipts. Technical reports would have been produced after each excavation, but none of them went public. All were filed under the same confidential designation: archaeological material of ecclesiastical interest, not authorized for circulation. What was there that needed to be excavated and then hidden again? Local employees, now retired, described the movement as something almost ritualistic. Workers instructed not to look directly at the removed parts, quickly covered structures, and the presence of men who, they never identified themselves but seemed to lead everything in silence. It wasn't just excavations, they were operations of containment. Whatever was dug up in that soil, it was not suitable for display in museums, but to be sealed, hidden, silenced. There are those who say that what they found did not belong to the history we were taught, but to the one who tried to erase. Some local workers who participated in the works without knowing what would be revealed began to tell fragments discreetly years later. The descriptions match. What rose from the ground was large, angular, and silently impossible. A perfectly carved stone base, walls that tapered with millimeter geometric accuracy, corridors that descended in a spiral, with symmetrical internal, chambers lined with a dark material, polished like obsidian, all without traces of modern tools or period marks. There was nothing there that recalled ancient European architecture. On the contrary, those who entered the structure report a feeling of displacement in time. The interior walls bore inscriptions, symbols that, according to an anonymous archaeologist, they resembled Proto-Sumerian and Demotic Egyptian more than any Latin language. But the most disturbing detail wasn't on the walls. It was at the top, a metallic symbol carved into the apex of the pyramid, shaped like an inverted sun star, surrounded by a circular serpent. It was removed the same day it was exposed. They took it before the structure was even completely photographed. From that moment on, everything changed. The entrance was sealed, the accesses buried, the name of the place off to internal maps of the diocese, as if the structure had never existed, as if naming her was too dangerous. Among the few records that escaped the information siege, there is a recurring detail that always returns with subtlety and precision. Some of the artifacts removed from the structure were sent directly to the Vatican. Boxes sealed with wax seals, transported under escort along internal routes of the church. No official note was issued, no press statement, just they entered the archives and disappeared. Sources close to the Vatican's secret archives, the Call Reserved section, confirmed that at least 2 metallic objects and a set of fragments with symbolic inscriptions were classified as material of doctrinal interest and redirected to a wing where not even cardinals have unrestricted access. The silence that followed was absolute. No publications, no academic mentions, no independent investigation authorized. As if what was discovered inside that pyramid not just contradict archaeology, but threatened a deeper pillar of institutional faith. What could be there that would justify so much silence? What type of energy, symbol, or message was present to the point of being considered incompatible with the official narrative? The answer may lie less in objects and more than they represented. When the objects disappeared into the silent archives of the Holy See, speculation began to grow on the margins of the visible between mystics, non-aligned archaeologists, and scholars of ancient traditions. The theory that most scares official circles. It is not that the pyramid was built by another civilization, but what does she? It was never meant to be a tomb. There were no remains. There were no burial chambers. What was found there, according to unofficial reports, was something different. a vibrational architecture. Some occult scholars suggest that the pyramid served as a frequency repository, a space built with sacred proportions, capable of keeping non-local energy active, a vibrational memory that predates organized religion, not a place to die, but a place to wake up, as if the structure had been made to store, amplify, or even channel a type of unauthorized consciousness, something that, if awakened now, could break the cycles of spiritual control imposed for centuries. What if the real reason for burying this pyramid it wasn't the time, but fear? Fear of what it represents. Fear of who could remember what is stored inside. For centuries we have been taught that the story of spirituality begins with revelation and ends with obedience. Everything that came before, the symbols, the temples, the cosmic rituals, it was labeled as paganism, idolatry, or ignorance. But what if that weren't the case? What if structures like the one found beneath European land prove that civilizations long before institutionalized Christianity? Have you already mastered energetic codes, advanced symbolic knowledge, and deep spiritual practices? This would call into question not only the timeline of Western faith, but also the idea that salvation began with a single sacred event. Because if these civilizations accessed the divine without intermediaries, portals were built based on sacred geometries, and if they understood the soul as a frequency to be awakened, not tamed, then the spiritual monopoly loses its foundation. The underground structure is not just stone. She is physical proof of a memory that has been erased, and given that, the choice was clear: not allow it to exist. At least, not publicly. Because the risk was not archaeological. It was symbolic. If the world knew that spirituality was once free, vibrant, and accessible to all, the current system would lose its foothold. And with it, control. The idea of a pyramid buried in the European subsoil seems at first glance an exotic piece on a distant board, something that intrigues us, but that still sounds far from everyday reality. But what if that weren't the case? And if this structure weren't beneath a remote desert, not even in an isolated archaeological zone, but hidden right under our feet, underneath a modern, busy city, protected by concrete and traffic and routine, a place no one would ever suspect? Some ancient maps suggest that the location of the pyramid is in the center of a large European capital. Other scholars point out that the surrounding architecture was shaped to preserve and camouflage. Buildings erected at strategic points, underground lines diverted with purpose, excavation-prohibited zones defined by law. And if the secret in this case, it was never hidden, just overlaid. But perhaps the most important question is not geographic. Maybe it's not just about the land. Perhaps the concealment is not just historical, nor just physical, but spiritual. And if this pyramid is also a living metaphor for what has been buried within us, an ancient knowledge, a deep access, an internal structure of power and remembrance, silently drowned out by modernity. In this case, true excavation does not depend on tools, but with courage. Courage to look inside and recognize that what was forgotten beneath the earth was also forgotten in the soul. History is not written with ink alone. It is also made of silences, seals, omissions, and aborted excavations. Maybe what was found underground no longer fit into the world they built up here. But there is something curious about buried structures. The more time passes, the harder it is to keep them hidden. You can bury a stone, but you cannot bury a call. Because if this pyramid really represents a portal, a frequency, a living memory, so maybe it's not waiting to be excavated. Maybe she's waiting to be remembered. If this journey has raised more questions than answers in you, then you are on the right path. Subscribe to the channel here, and continue walking with us through the cracks of what has been forgotten. And if you've made it this far, write the following words in the comments: Sacred Underground. So I will know that you are among the few who still hear what the world tries to bury. See you in the next mystery. And remember, sometimes what's hidden is exactly what you came to find.